Any Given Sunday league, this is new for a lot of people in this league. I know I do like to do little recaps and things to try and see how we're at. Normally I do a draft review, but unfortunately this particular year, if you know my living situation, this isn't it. Some flights were involved this week that were unexpected, so I didn't get to do the draft recap. I'm going to do a number of these videos anyway. You're going to get sick of my voice as it goes, so maybe you don't really need it from me. I just like doing it. But anyway, this is our week one recap. We are going to get to our league and how things went and maybe a brief look forward. But first, just a few words about week one action in the NFL. I feel like after week one, it is a yearly tradition. Are we overreacting or underreacting? Now, it might be hard not to have these instincts, especially if you saw a lot of Yahoo red, but if you looked around, most people were well under their predicteds. In fact, a lot of people were under their predicteds and still won because the other person had some of the real people that caused issues this week. If you were lucky enough to be in the green, you probably won unless you just happened to play the other person who was in the green. But this is not new. This time last year, if you remember, we were talking about how some offenses were down and people were touting people like Derek Carr and the Saints offense who came out of the gates running, and people were fighting to get any waiver wire person they could on that Saints offense, and that didn't exactly hold water. So for those who spent a lot of fab dollars on a Cleveland Brown, just bear that in mind. Now, there are some things to obviously panic about. Worthy with the huge injury, and I think on Yahoo it was up to about 90 or just over 90% of people that had Worthy lost week one, so I get why you're upset. But there are the AJ Browns. If you had any piece of Cincy's offense or Detroit's offense, you're probably wondering what exactly to do. But there were a number of people that I think are going to be strong later on that just fell north, or sorry, I should say south, of that Daniel Jones-Mendoza line of week one. So I don't know if that's really the point to kind of peak or valley on here, but what I do think is pretty epic, and just like a young adolescent male who maybe, if dates are still a thing, goes on a date, and I don't know, we're in that paradigm because I think after week one, we may have peaked a little bit early. We might have had the game of the week, or the year, I should say, on Sunday night. The Bills and Ravens, I'm assuming most people, if you like football, you either watched it or you're at least keeping tabs with it. Also, too, because of fantasy. There's a lot of people up there that were putting up monster fantasy numbers, and it probably stands to reason that if you were in the Yahoo Green, you probably had a decent piece of this, or realistically, one of the two quarterbacks. I think even within that game, we see over and under reactions. Calling this a meltdown just because Derrick Henry, who had an epic game, and I know I haven't played professional sports, so according to some people on ESPN, I shouldn't be commenting on this, but he had an amazing game. He just fumbled. And realistically, that's what that meltdown was, a fumble and a 3-and-out. Mismanagement of clock, sure, but it's week one. If we're going to talk about meltdowns, I mean, this isn't even the worst Ravens-Bills meltdown that was the worst in the last few months. We can't forget that Andrews, failed catch there. And I know last year seems like epic, way longer than we think ago, but do have a bit of a memory here. Anywho, it is just a unique one. I mean, it was a scoregami, 41-40. It was the first time, apparently, if you scored 40 points and you rushed for over 235 yards, you were 277-0, and that would be now 277-1. So we do have a lot to focus on there, but realistically, just as football fans, we might have watched the two best players going after it in hopefully what's a setup for something later on down the line. Now, it is pretty fun to talk about two teams that aren't the Chiefs in the AFC as being epic, but realistically, there was not that many other games that were really like, what was game number two? I mean, I guess the Monday nighter having the comeback Minnesota Chicago was pretty fun, but it wasn't like a really well played game. And if you really want to get all millennial down on Caleb Williams and you read the Wickersham kind of series of articles, you know what I'm talking about. If not, I'll probably refer to those later. That was okay. I mean, it was a fun finish. Are we really looking at Jets Pittsburgh as game number two in terms of exciting finishes or well played games? Because I don't want to say that either. So really, it was just focusing on this one. I think that made me miss football, and hopefully that was the same for you if you got to watch it, especially if you had Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen. And Josh Allen owners were sweating until probably the end, but then they ended up being kind of the important key pieces to keep yourself in the game and to keep yourself from overreacting. How that's going to carry into week two, I'm not really sure, but at least we've got a couple pillars down. We know it's some of the players already, and then we just got to see who bounces back in week two and who doesn't. I'm trying my best to make these segments a little bit shorter this year just for my own purposes, so let's see how I did. But more importantly, let's see how the league did in week one before we jump to week two. Top score of the week goes to Ernie McCracken, so well done, Andrew. And actually, this matchup was very much a Sunday night darling. We're going to see, obviously, the quarterbacks and running back kind of situation. This really did come down to the Sunday nighter. In that case, let's go to our number one here first. Lamar Jackson was our quarterback 4. Derrick Henry, running back, won and by 11 points. And that kind of led the way. But if you just take a look top to bottom, one of the things that Andrew avoided was, aside from their defense, which it's kind of tough when you're looking at your defense against your best running back and quarterback, tough calls to make there. You didn't really have too many stinkers. Now, you are team suspect, unfortunately, just in terms of the number of people you have on your bench that currently aren't playing. So you made all the right calls, and honestly, you didn't suffer any of the huge impacts, which is a huge reason why in a week where I would imagine 140 is not going to be the top score we get on a week-by-week basis, but it was for week 1, so well done there. Jake, unfortunately, your boy couldn't quite get you back, although I'm wondering how much you were looking back and forth, especially near the end. But Josh Allen obviously was our quarterback, won by about 10 points. So you were one of the higher scoring people that ended up losing. Not the highest, but second, obviously. And you can see here your quarterbacks kind of led the way. It was really your running back kind of depth. A.J. Brown obviously didn't help you out. But looking at your bench, you do have some people to play. You might be disappointed you didn't put Kincaid in there. He was the tight end too. Wouldn't have made up for the whole thing, but at least would have gotten you a little bit closer. So unfortunately, Jake, you start 0-1. And Andrew, you're the guy to beat out of the gate. Even more rare, I would imagine, someone who doesn't even get into the green on Yahoo is very rarely going to be our second highest scorer, but House of Gibbs. And actually, Gibbs is a great way of putting it. A couple points, but nothing special there. But hey, it doesn't matter. You got the win, and you are our second highest total points in week 1, which you needed to take down Paul, who was our highest scoring person who did not win. Try to avoid the loser comment because that one's going to come back at me in a few rounds here. Nakua was our wide receiver 5 on the week, and Laporta was just outside of the top 10. But Fields has to be your darling there. He was the quarterback too. If you can put up numbers like that, you got to be pretty happy. On the bench, you didn't make any bad decisions really. Not starting a Brown is always a good decision, and that is from a Browns fan, just for people that don't know. For the other side here, a pretty good team. I'm going to avoid the idea that now you're in a pretty tough situation in terms of health-wise, but your quarterbacks were quite strong. Mahomes just outside of the top 5. Your running backs are great. Cook, running back 3, and Jones Senior, did quite well for yourself. It really was your wide receivers. Jamar Chase, when your number 1 guy puts up a fart like that, there's not much you're going to do. Now, you are team bench, unfortunately, and you could have shifted this matchup. Keon Coleman was the wide receiver 3. Javonte Williams was the running back 4. Now, no one blames you for not putting him in, but I just do have to highlight that had you made some changes, that was enough to tip the scales. But unfortunately for you, didn't get the win, but I would imagine a league like this, it's going to come down to points scored. So the fact that you were the highest that didn't win might end up paying off in the end, but not as much as a win. So congratulations, Kevin. Same, but different here. Joe in the early 120s was enough to get you a win and our third highest scoring. Ben, weirdly enough, third highest of the people that did not win. So that was kind of balanced out. I would say on the Motor City Dudes front, you got to be pretty happy that McCaffrey even played because there was all that hype that maybe he wouldn't, and he looked fine. He didn't crack the top 5. He was just outside as the running back 6, I believe. Similar with Caleb Williams, you got to be happy with the performance. Just maybe he's one of those guys that's good at fantasy but doesn't win you games. The only one that you cracked the top 5, actually the only one between the two teams that rang the bell was Denver was the number 1 defense, and the only of the top 5 that anyone started. Indy, Jacksonville, Tennessee, and Chicago all were not started, and I believe are still available, but they might have been more matchup based than anything else. We can look at both kind of had a similar drawback here, whereas just a lot of, there was the problem with consistency, having a few players that wet farted a little bit. But I think on the plus side for you, Joe, you got to be looking at Garrett Wilson catching a football occasionally might help you out in the long run. Both benches, I would say Debo is probably the shining light for you over there, Ben. As a receiver, would have been a nice addition, but would you really start him over Drake London and T. Higgins? Probably not, just that both had kind of rough weeks, and we'll see how Drake's injury kind of holds up. But everyone was talking about the overweight Debo. Apparently it didn't matter so much. Had a good debut for Washington. So nothing really this was kind of typical of the week, that nothing really glaring. T. Higgins obviously probably being the most disappointing because, Devontae Smith wasn't coming in with as much hype. And Tyreek Hill, you knew what you were getting with that one, man. He's about as volatile as they come. Kelsey, I would say, I forgot this part. He did ring the bell. He was our tight end 3. Just tight ends did not have awesome weeks. No one really, really went off. And the tight end 1, who I haven't gotten to yet, already might be in some injury concerns. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Either way, congrats on the win. I feel like this is going to be a tight league, so a win is a win is a win. You start off 1-0. Ben, there's 2 people that actually ended up worse than you, so don't feel too bad. And we get to those two people now. So unfortunately, Michael, I mean, actually both Michaels finished 9 and 10 this week. You had the low of the week and just had kind of a rough go. I mean, Hertz looks like he was great. I'd be pretty pumped if I were you with Achane and Sutton. Both people that, Sutton was kind of the unsexy, but everyone knew he was going to put up numbers, and he did, even though Bo Nix didn't really. And Achane, we know if he's healthy and Tua's healthy, he's an asset, so that's great. It was the Pacheco's. It was really the Nico Collins, the kind of consistent underperformance that bit you a little bit. Even if we look at your bench, you do have some bright spots here. When your bright spots are Brown, we'll see how that plays out. But obviously he was a coveted waiver wire pickup for a lot of people, and you don't need to pick him up because you already have him. So that kind of bodes well for next week for you. V, well done, buddy. I mean, you get the win. I love the unicorn too. Fantastic call. Justin Herbert was the QB5, so you were putting up. Actually, you had a couple guys ring the bell. Brock Bowers was that tight end I was mentioning, the tight end 1. So yeah, tight end 1 didn't even get 14 points. Where I think we're all hoping for a little bit better for our tight ends going forward. No pun intended. Bijan was the running back 2, so great week from him. But even more shocking, Breece Hall did stuff. That's got to be huge for you because, I mean, all the Jets. Turns out you should have taken Jets instead of Bengals for week 1 and you'd be a winner. And speaking of which, you were the winner. So congrats on that. You do have some depth here to pay attention to. And one of the few things that, you're not looking other than that the Bowers issue, hopefully not a whole lot of week 2 kind of kerfuffle. So even though 120, like I'm saying, and you were actually north of your projections because your projections were quite low. So congrats. I think there's only 2 teams that can say that. 120, I don't know if it's going to win you every week in this league, but it certainly won you this one. So who cares? Jim, I think it's going to be shocking to say that you were the winner who scored the least amount of points. 110 is not going to win most weeks, but when you're up against the second worst, this guy right here, you did just fine. But also, I think we can go ahead and say Joe Burrow, if he has to play week 1 and against the Browns every week, then maybe he's not going to be a good fantasy pickup. But my bet is he's going to bounce back just fine like he has in pretty much every other year. The reason I say it's shocking is you actually do have a disproportionate number of people on the top 5, considering other people as well and how well they did. I mean, Ekbuka, great start. He was the wide receiver 4. Tyler Warren was the tight end 5. I think part of the problem is some of you guys who went off. Yep, there they are. They're on your bench. Etienne, running back 5. Zay Flowers, wide receiver 1. And while he didn't crack the top 6, you are already giving a lot of people in this league Penix envy by throwing him in on your bench. Would you really have started him over the other 2? Probably not. But week 2, I don't know, man. You're going to have some decisions to make. For me, can I not talk about this? One of the bummers about running a league and trying to do videos like this is when you have to talk about yourself and you have a rough week. I swear to you, in all of my other leagues, I'm about half and half. Unfortunately, 2 that I'm commissioner in, I just got shelled, which is not awesome. Worthy, I was not worthy of it's a bad pun, putting him in my lineup. No, apparently I was, because I just got shelled by him. And, there is something to be said, too, when one of your stinkers comes out of the gate early. Sometimes you like it and you can rally the troops. Sometimes it's just a sign of things to come. I don't even have anyone rank the top 5, even on my bench, although I do have some life down low here, so we'll see if I can turn that into a week 2 bounce back. But this is less about me, more about Jim. Congrats, buddy. You're 1-0. There's going to be some weeks where I look at the standings and see how things go. In this one, I'm not your 1-0 or your 0-1. Who really cares? Even going into round 2 matchups, don't think that the fact that the 9 and 10 are currently playing each other in the first round is not lost on us. But let's be honest, week 1 is all a lot about matchups. I'm not going to read too much into this. It does look like we're going to have some close calls. It also looks like 130 to 140, I would be willing to bet, is the standard we want to go for. But who knows? It's a new league, and let's see how it pans out. Well, with week 1 in the books, we're looking ahead to week 2. If you manage to get out of week 1 unscathed and even with a win or some positive vibes, congrats, because like I said, points were few and far between. It took a couple weeks last year too to get rolling, so let's see how it works. The only other kind of business we have to tend to in this particular league is I do want to do a vote so we know the payout structure in terms of whether we're going to honor our regular season champ or not. And I'd rather do that sooner than later so that the people who feel that they might be regular season champs don't just chime in. We're in it for the long haul. I don't think we're going to have too much problem on that voting. But anywho, like I said, if you got out of week 1 with some positive vibes, congrats. If you didn't, hey, no time like the present to start the rise or the run. Or maybe you want to start trading stuff away, planning for year 2, year 3. I don't know. It's a keeper. Let's have at it. In the meantime, good luck in week 2, crew.